Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back. So we've got a treat for you now. We've got Linda Baer, who is used to be at the Gates Foundation, where she was the Senior Program Officer for Post-Secondary Success, and is now running her own I4 Solutions Consulting. We've got Don Norris, President and Founder of Strategic Initiatives, which is a management consulting firm in Arlington. We specialize in leading and navigating change around enterprise. And we've got Al Essa, who is Director of Innovation and Analytics at Desire to Learn, who are one of our sponsors here at LAK. And what they're going to be doing is talking about the results of quite a large-scale survey of educational institutions. What are they doing with analytics at the moment? What is the gap between their needs and the current available solutions? It's a sort of baseline collective intelligence for us to know where the institutions are at right now, as well as where they should be going. So it's brilliant that we've got them here. I can't wait to hear what they've been doing. They've got lots to share. And I'm just going to hand over to Linda, and it's your show. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We are very pleased to be here at your second annual conference. I love the fact that it's doubled in numbers. Your enthusiasm is just infectious, and great things continue to happen as you continue to discuss. I remember on a very cold day in Banff last year, we were meeting at a post-conference, and all of the people who knew each other by email were sitting in a kind of standing in a circle around the coffee and teapot because they wanted to be face to face. And so that's really the duality of the world that we are living in. We're going to present on some initial preliminary findings from work that included a major survey of institutions and vendors about what's going on in the student success space. And so we're going to talk a little bit from the fact that in the literature now there are a lot of swirling about defining what is analytics and which realm are you in, and particularly this conference is rightly so emphasizing the learning analytics side of the house. We're a little broader than that in terms of where we're going with this, including optimizing student success, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom, and anywhere else that learners can continue to improve what they're doing in their learning opportunities. We take optimizing student success from the work of Richard Davenport and others, and so we'll talk a little about that as we go along. But really what we're trying to do is get at the core of what is it to have an organization, have your institutions, have communities, have the idea that you are ready in terms of your data capacity, the data mining, whatever you're doing in terms of accessing data, and that you're able to get it in the hands of those that need it to make the kind of decisions that need to be made in time for students to continue to be successful in what's going on, not so late in the fact that students are lost to us. And so we know that there's a lot of effort on how do we improve student success. So the survey itself, we surveyed leading institutions. We're at 40 plus right now in terms of the number of institutions that have filled out a rather comprehensive survey instrument. And in order to do that, we actually are contacting the institutional members that we think can best help answer the question. It's not a questionnaire that can go to one person and adequately be filled out. Some of you know that because you've participated. And by the way, if you're interested in participating, we are looking for more participants. So jot down a note to us, hand it to us sometime during the conference, and we'll put you on the list. Likewise, we are taking a look at vendors in the field, and right now we're at about 20 plus in terms of vendors who are developing solutions for students. Don started this some time ago. In fact, did some interviewing at one of the EDUCAUSE conferences, annual conferences, and did little video clips of, hello, what are you doing today in terms of analytics? And it will be a nice historic context because what was being done then a couple of years ago is certainly mushroomed in terms of a lot of interest and a lot of enthusiasm that you'll see some of today during the reception. We're going to give you some of the preliminary results, and we'll have this posted both on this website as well as EDUCAUSE's website. And really begin to look at where are the gaps. If you've read the big data report from McKinsey, you know that education doesn't exactly fare on the high list of those ready, able, willing to participate in data. and use it to maximize anything. There's a lot of things that are going on in higher ed and education in general that we need to bridge and strengthen for them to maximize their use, as those of you out here as practitioners know. The next steps will be the development of a toolkit for building organizational capacity for analytics, and there will be chapters and discussion points where this is featuring some of what we're learning through these case studies, as well as next steps. So what would an institution that's just beginning in this field want to do with the kind of resources they have at the moment? What are some of the middle level? What are some of the high flyers doing? And how can we help all to get to a better place to maximize student opportunity? We're going to wrap it up with a little back and forth panel conversation. And so with that, we're just going to get started. If you haven't seen the Richard Davenport work on analytics, take a look at it. He's written several books that are really important books. I sometimes carry around my favorite book and then purchase some and share with people. But the analytics, using analytics for competitive advantage, using the idea of where he's taken case studies from business and organization and put them together. We've taken a variation of that on this chart to talk about what would be your goal. And to date, a lot of campuses say we've got data, and they may even say we're awash in data. We got more data and we know what to do with, or we can't get to it when we need it, and so on and so forth. The goal of this project is to get more data accessible at a better level to make a difference. And so you'll see that the questions go: what are happening, how many, what are the demographics behind it, what's exactly the problem, what actions are needed. If you get above that line, there's an interesting place where you're residing now in terms of better statistical analysis of what you're seeing in terms of patterns and direction, depending on what learner segment you're looking at. What if these trends continue? And a lot of people are ringing the bell saying we're in trouble, folks. If these trends continue, if the idea of who's getting to high school, and I'm saying high school, those getting to high school and completing, we're in trouble. Those getting into college, we admit them, colleges and universities. We say they're there, ready, and if we say that, we should be supporting and optimizing what they know about it. And John Campbell in the audience has talked about, the obligation of knowing. If we know some of these things that can improve the success of students, what are we doing about it? What's our obligation to do something about it? What will happen next, and that's where we get into the predictive modeling that you've had really rich conversations, particularly today, but ongoing tomorrow and the next. That's the coming together of your research communities of practice telling us what will happen next, because we can predict better and better today. And I really think we should keep in mind what's the very best that can happen. What's the very best we can have happen on behalf of students, learning, our educational environments. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about optimizing student success, and Don's going to take over.
Yeah, and Linda, why don't you just stay here, and we'll tag team the rest of the time, and you can drive. I wanted to thank the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for sponsoring our research through a consulting services contract. This is the typology that emerged. When we got into this and started to talk to the institutions, we had an idea about what we would find in terms of what are institutions doing, literally, to optimize student success. But the answer was far richer than we thought. So what we did as we worked through it, we created this typology. Now, this is not like a Maslow's hierarchy, where you begin at stage one and you work up to actualization at the pinnacle. We found institutions that were doing, many of the 40 leading institutions were active in 5 or 6 or even 7 of these categories, but none of them thought their job was done. Let me walk through and describe to you the typology that we came out of the grounded research with. The first level was managing the student pipeline, dealing with at-risk students. This is the typical strategic enrollment management activities that most institutions do. Many institutions are very sophisticated in this, using a lot of predictive analytics, data mining, and things relating to this, but all relating to recruiting, admitting, and enrolling students, and dealing with at-risk students rather than at-risk behavior. And many institutions, by the way, the overall analytics activity at the enterprise level, at the institutional level, is driven by these strategic enrollment management activities. The second level was eliminating impediments to success. This is like the work that Katie Haycock at the Educational Trust has been supporting, where institutions analyze their bottlenecks, their choke points. They look at the first-year experience. Many institutions have improved retention dramatically by dealing with this. They eliminate bottleneck courses. They create more courses in those bottleneck areas. They deal with the analysis of the policies and the processes dealing with students at risk and otherwise, and improve that throughput. That was the second level and stage. The third level is a very interesting one because it involves predictive analytics in a big way. And this is dynamic query, alert, and intervention, dealing not with at-risk students, but with at-risk behavior. The best examples here are the very well-known and described analytic activities, the predictive analytic activities practiced by the for-profit institutions. And in our sample, we included the University of Phoenix, Capella University, Kaplan, and a number of others that fit this category. And from them saw some very interesting things, where they have taken the embedding of predictive analytics into the academic processes as a very advanced activity, but not just, of course, the for-profits, because the example of the Purdue Signals program, Rio Salado College, and a number of our other examples show that public institutions and private institutions of a variety of kinds are finding ways to embed predictive analytics into their activities. The fourth level is what we call learner relationship management systems and processes. And essentially what we had here was a wide variety of institutional practices trying to deal with the issue of how do we focus on learner behavior and how do we follow learner behavior. Now, we had some institutions like Northeastern University that took Salesforce.com and essentially turned it from a customer relationship system into a learner relationship management system and went at it that way. We had many of the vendors, such as Desire to Learn, who are in the process of migrating their offerings and their student success system that Al will be talking about tomorrow in his session into a system that has learner relationship management characteristics. You have the Sherpa product that was developed at South Orange Community College District that manages the relationship and nudges students in a way to move them forward. So this is another step, the fourth step in the typology. This brings us then to the fifth step, which is why we're all here today, which is personalized learning system environments and learning analytics. Now, this is a very important step because, or level in the typology, because learning analytics really spans institutional or enterprise analytics, what's going on in the institution, and all the other levels up to this point have focused on what's going on in the institution. But learning analytics is the first level we see here in which we really can go within the institution or we can go outside and look at free-range learning. What the students learn on their own. What do they learn at other times that they want to have certified and be brought into a knowledge pathway that they subsequently enter from an institution. So learning analytics is hugely important to the expansion of what's going on in analytics for student success. The sixth level is data mining and big data. Now, obviously, data mining goes on at some of these other levels, at the strategic enrollment management level, at the predictive analytics that are embedded in process. But what we're really talking about here is large-scale data mining activities, many of which can actually span beyond the institution to be multiple institutions. One of the projects that's funded by the Gates Foundation, the Predictive Analytics Reporting Project, involves 6 institutions that are pulling together a federated database with over 800,000 records to demonstrate the concept and to set the stage for a large-scale federated database that can be used for data mining and analytics activities. Obviously, these kinds of analytics can have many, many uses. And finally, the 7th level we mentioned is extending the concept of student success beyond academic success to job success, employment success, life success, and to include employability at work And of course, here you have the capacity of joining together institutional data sets with employment data sets, with government data sets. You know, Monster.com has 110 million resumes and job descriptions on file. Think of the data mining capability when you put together Monster.com, state agencies that are dealing with employment, federal agencies, and institutions. So we looked at our 40 institutions and evaluated them all and captured this on the activities they have going on at this level. And this is part of the data system that's available for our study.
Some of the categories of work on the institutions that related to organizational capacity are listed here, and they aren't of any surprise probably, but if you look at them in an ecosystem way, the idea of what do you build and how do you build it out is important. You've heard about technology audits, you've heard about maybe analytics audits, the idea of assessing where is your system, where is your institution in its capacity to do some of these things. Certainly one of the areas, but not the only area, is technology, infrastructure, tools, applications, solutions. The idea is that doesn't reside by itself, though. It sometimes starts there, but one of the more important things we're finding from the research is the place where institutions come together and work together in teamwork with IT and with IR and with academics and with student success and with the other productivity measures. That's where it starts maximizing and leveraging that optimal place for student success. So technology is a beginning place, certainly. The other place is processes, policies, and practices. We would say one of the major questions should be what policies are enabling you to maximize student success and what things might be in the way. And so, for example, in the state of Minnesota, it was determined that having a more thorough pipeline of K-12 to college university information was important, that we should begin to be able to share the data systems and the data sets so that we could better prepare, know where students were prepared or where they needed more assistance. It took about 3 years to get through the state legislature for that, but it was an important first step. So a policy that says, where do you have the records, how comprehensive are they, to whom are they available, and so on, becomes really important. It would be very interesting for you to take a check on what policies are helping to enable student success and what policies, for some reason or other, particularly in the more traditional realm, are getting in the way. And I think all of us still are having a foot in both worlds when you talk about what policies relate to traditional on-site education and what are now applying to online and what applies to hybrid. And really, a lot of people just don't know how to meld these together. The value skills of faculty, staff, students, and alumni, one of the biggest issues and the gaps that need to be addressed has to do with skill sets. And what we heard from some of the campuses was about the time they had somebody all trained up because they kind of grew with their system and they knew what was going on. Probably one of the vendors hired them, and off they went. Or somebody else would hire them because it's such an up-and-coming field. And we don't have very many opportunities to have ready education of the people who are actually working in the field. Where is it? I mean, is it RR? Is it IT? Is it academics? Where is it that it needs to reside? Well, probably across all. And George Siemens certainly has been working with a major online course and moving toward a degree that will help people maybe be certified in analytics. That if we are going to be a knowledge age, a knowledge-based economy, more people need to be better equipped to work in that field. And so that's part of what's going on in that one. The biggest one probably, if you read the big data report and the McKinsey report on high-performing institutions, is the fact of culture and behavior. I've been surveying a small survey in the state of Minnesota of universities, and it is just astounding to have people say, we can't get at the data. We're data deprived. We're data deprived. We really want that data, and we can't get it. And why the 21st century, where we have more data than ever before, people are still saying those kinds of things, really critical. And it's a critical thing to say all of us have to be about this together, and it resides finally with leadership and the skill sets that say this will be important. Purdue, much of what's going on certainly has come from leadership that has said we're going to improve our retention and graduation and you're going to do it by this year. And so there John got his marching orders, and off he went. So that's a little of where we are. The universities, we're not going to take a long time on this, but you can hear more about it or get the actual names of who are participating. But you can see that we believed it had to be a wide cross-section of participants so that we can begin to say the for-profits, as you've heard, Don has talked about their leading. Well, sometimes those policies and practices and different infrastructure may be at a different level for them because they don't sometimes have some of the barriers or boundaries others might. So you see the list of where we've got players. We are happy to say we're going to be in conversation with Solar so that we can get far broader perspective on this from an international side of things, and that will be happening, conversations tomorrow. Then come the vendors.
Let me say a few words about the vendors. When we started the project, we had a sense that we wanted to capture the business intelligence and ERP vendors, which actually is redundant because there was a spate of consolidations where every ERP vendor figured they had to buy a BI vendor in order to really be fulfilled. So you can see there was a consolidation several years ago. But we also got the LMS providers, some advising and retention providers, and analytics consulting, general advising companies. We got 20. We wanted to start with 20. We knew there were more, but we wanted to get going on the research, and we've completed these to the stage for to be part of our preliminary report, and we're finishing the detailed write-ups here. One of the things Linda mentioned, we have a very detailed questionnaire that we use with the institutions. We also have a detailed questionnaire with the vendors. And we've got all of this information at the Edge of One World database where it can be updated and will be updated and kept fresh so that we can bring these together and actually create a bit of a match-up service. Now, in addition, we are looking at our next 20 vendors, and we have continuing funding with the Gates Foundation to create this toolkit for building organizational capacity for analytics. In that, we will expand the case studies of the institutions, and we will expand this to 40 vendors. And these are the vendors we've included. Now, you see what we've done in this next round. We have added a whole bunch of generalized gen learning, next gen learning, type providers because they are playing a real part in the analytics game too. And this is, I'm making a call to anybody who's here, who's a vendor, who's in this space, who wants to be included, please come up and see us after the presentation. And indeed, if any institution that would like to consider being included, come and talk to us because we want to make sure that we have the right group of institutions and vendors included. But what we'll be able to do in this data set is to compare what the leading institutions and the vendors have done. Now, let me say, in selecting this group, these two groupings, there was a method to our madness. We wanted to select 40 institutions that had the reputation of doing good things in analytics. And we took institutions that had been selected by Gates for next-gen learning funding. We took our own recommendations from experts in the field, and we also got a selection to cover all types of institutions. From talking to the leading institutions, we wanted to identify what are the leaders doing and what, therefore, is it possible for the industry to aspire to. From the vendors, we wanted to know what they were currently providing and what their plans were, and how much tension is there in the rubber band of pulling analytics forward, and we found that there's a good bit of positive tension. But we also wanted to ask the vendors, what are the other institutions doing? We're talking to the 40 high flyers, but how about the rest? And you're dealing with other institutions. What is the average run-of-the-mill institution doing in terms of their learning capacity, their analytics capacity? So that combination of leading institutions to see what the leading potential was, vendors to find out what their aspirations were, and also to get a sense of what the industry as a whole was doing.
So we came up with some preliminary insights to begin with, and some of it is really probably every institution in some way or another know at least about the terminology. I know in one of the sessions somebody said they knew about if you were asking a a faculty member about improving student learning or whatever that they could that they were for. They were positive about that. If you ask them about learning analytics, sometimes they don't know what that means, and it kind of tells you a little bit about how we're transmitting some of this. But the leading edge institutions are really beginning to show good return on investment because of their student success analytics, and you know, Purdue is certainly a leader in that, but by and large you end up seeing really major results because of beginning to take these tool sets seriously and instituting across the board. The more students, the better in terms of this. We're developing good case studies across the board, but a lot of institutions are interested about hearing about how others are doing so that they can learn from them. There are different patterns for different institutions, certainly, often because of how much can be invested or what has been traditionally already invested or what legacy system might have already been in place, and so on. Leadership is absolutely critical, and we're still trying to figure out ways with EDUCAUSE and ask you and others about how can we get more to the leadership for them to understand better what was going on. I remember an article not too long ago that said, you know, presidents, you have to know about IT. You can't just leave it to your IT folks. And I think we're in that same kind of place now. You have to understand it enough to say we're going to improve, and we know certain tool sets are going to help us improve. And it's not just presidents. You know, it can be chancellors, it can be systems, it can be states, it can be federal government in terms of what kind of leadership is there to really say we can do better and we must. There are a lot of different examples, and finally a wide variety of build, buy, and mashups, and that's some of what you're talking about here when you're talking in your presentations about how have you put things together, and the build, buy, mashup. One of the things we heard, because we hosted two analytics events, national analytics events in Minnesota a couple of years ago, and one of the things we heard that seemed to be uppermost in people's minds is we may have data sets over here, but there are data sets here, and there are data sets here, and there are data set here, and our biggest issue is they're not talking to one another. We can't figure out how to make that work. You know, learning management systems might not talk to student engagement systems, might not talk to something else. And so those were some of the issues we heard, and we heard some insights from vendors as well.
There's a tremendously expanded emphasis in analytics among the vendors. If you went to the EDUCAUSE conference 2 years ago, analytics was just emerging as an important issue. This past year, in October, November, it was a bigger issue. It'll be huge when we have the EDUCAUSE meeting this year. There are expanding student success solutions from the BI, ERP, LMS vendors. They're working hard on this. They've caught on to the notion that student success is very important. There are all sorts of new vendors in many of these categories. Retention and student success vendors like Starfish Retention Solutions that is able to demonstrate very substantial outcomes with the institutions they're working with. Personalized learning, K through 12 vendors that are moving up in the higher ed workforce learning. One of the big pieces of news is that cloud-based applications are, as they relate to analytics, are starting to demonstrate the cloud's potential to lend vendor infrastructures, solutions, processes, cross-sector linkages, and know-how. Vendors like Pearson eCollege have hundreds of institutions in the cloud with their LMS and analytics offerings and are able to do comparative analytics across those institutions because they have the same interoperability, they have the same capacity, and they've bunched together the talent to do it. So there are some and most of the other vendors are moving to cloud-based solutions. So we really have some emerging demonstrations that the cloud has tremendous potential in this area. And there are very strong marketplace incentives for continuing vendor innovations, expansion into next-gen learning, and expanding the consulting and support services they can provide to institutions.
Well, finally, in terms of some of the preliminary insights we have from the institutions, many of the institutional leaders overestimate their data. Is that a surprise? We're overestimating. Of course we're doing well. A colleague and I did a survey once about partnering in the learning market space, and we did some case studies on the Learning Anytime, Anyplace partnerships that came out of FIPSE, Funds for Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. And one president said, well, you have to be brutally honest. If you're in a consortium with other presidents, you have to be willing to put up front that we failed or we didn't get it quite done. I don't know a president today that's really willing to do that. So anyway, sometimes they overestimate. And so we're working on some of the development of something that might look more like an analytics IQ. What do you know? How do you know it? What else can you learn more about? We need affordable solutions. This can't be left to just the ones that can afford to keep building out. And those that have built out have to understand that the capacity to use what's there has to continue to move throughout the institution, has to get in the hands of those that can make the difference with students, including students themselves. More and more demand on accountability will continue to spread, but we need to make sure we've got the quality we need, the usability we need, the resources to sustain what's going on here. And finally, as we said before, the build, buy, mashup, the idea of institutional-based work, a lot of legacy tools started up or tools that people developed with the free-range learning that's now going to come together and really develop some really exciting things in the marketplace.
Well, I bring glad tidings for people who are in the analytics business like us. There's a worldwide talent gap in analytics. All of the reports that have been done, the recent McKinsey Global report on data, big data, pointed this out. And in higher education, the talent gap is huge. So the lack of analytics expertise and experience in our industry, difficulties in making hires with people who have commercial predictive analytics experience, and then, as Linda said, having them hired away by commercial vendors who might be able to pay them twice the salary that an institution can. This is all part of the problem. There's a pervasive need for professional development at all levels, including the need for free-range personal capacity building for individuals, for learners who are trying to figure out how they're going to engage on their own learning activities in a world that's being opened up, where analytics are going to open up the availability and knowledge of what learners can learn for themselves in conjunction with other resources. There will be a continuing need for continuing enhancements in tools, applications, solutions, and services. The reason that leaders think they're doing better than they really are is that the bar has been raised. 3 years ago, 5 years ago, analytics meant having an ERP system and a report writer. And now things have changed considerably, and the perceptions of the leadership have not kept the pace in many cases. And finally, there's a tremendous need for consulting, know-how sharing, institutional capacity augmentation. And what we see developing, I described Pearson E. College, the efforts of other vendors to build online activities, the federated data activities like in the PAR project. Most of us, when you look at this extrapolated several years in the future, we can see the emergence of constellations of collaborators, vendor communities, federated solutions that find ways to collaborate and make sure that we're not just seeking individual institutional solutions to analytics activities.
Well, we've got some next steps, and that can include you. We'd like any of you that might be interested in being part of this survey, or as we have discussed, the SOLAR will be discussing the use of this survey with maybe some variations for their specific needs. So we're going to continue to build the case studies and extend the interviews. We are developing some frequently asked questions. We'll show some of that as we go along. We're hoping to develop what's called a match-up service. Institutions like you that are trying to solve these kinds of issues related to your student population or student learner segments are using solutions like this, and they're getting this kind of result from it. Those kinds of connecting pieces are what we'll be looking at. We said we're going to continue to develop the toolkit. We're working with EDUCAUSE as they have featured analytics, their year of data analytics, YODA. For those of YODA.
Excellent.
And finally, just accelerate more of this understanding of how do you better develop organizational capacity, because that's going to be really the name of the game. We do have a few questions about match-up service, but we want to turn to Al and have him talk a little bit from the perspective of the vendor community in relation to not only the survey itself, but where he sees things going among many of his clients.
Well, thank you. It's late in the day, so I thought I'd engage in some gossip. And I'm not going to talk about what we're doing, but what our observations are about our clients and what they're doing and where they're going. Particularly, if we think of analytics as strategic, I'll just kind of throw out some assumptions that analytics is strategic and there will be winners and losers. So if we were to engage in handicapping which institutions will succeed with analytics and who will lose out. And this relates to capacity. So as a vendor, we want to make sure that we succeed, but it's a partnership. If organizations don't have the capacity for analytics, we will not succeed. So when we think about capacity for analytics, we think of it along three dimensions. Dimension one is technology, dimension two is culture, and dimension three is business. So let me just quickly make a point along each dimension. So on the technology side, what we see are the institutions that we think are going to do well. Infrastructure and IT. Most of my career, I've been toiling in the coal mines of IT. It's a dirty business. It's hard. You got to shovel a lot of stuff. And that complexity is not going away. So one characteristic, I think, of winners in the analytics space will be the capacity of your IT environment to deal with complexity. That's not going to go away. You've gotten a flavor of all the issues. You have to pull in data from various sources. You have to have big data, data warehousing, predictive modeling, blah, blah, blah. Okay? A lot of complexity. So the capacity of your IT department and the technology side is something to watch for. On the culture side, the winners that we see are traditional education. They tends very much to work in silos. You've got the academic side, student services, institutional research, assessment, and the ones who are really charging ahead more quickly than others are bringing everyone at the institution at the table and viewing analytics in a very systematic and coherent way. The third, on the business side, there's this saying by Samuel Johnson, the prospects of an imminent hanging concentrates the mind. The for-profits really get it. The nonprofits still, should we, would we, could we, can we? The idea of urgency around analytics, we see it when we deal with our for-profits. Why? Because student success, lost seat, lost revenue. It just comes down to that. So I think there's something really to be learned from the for-profits on the thinking of education as a business. That's really an alien concept. Still, we're dragging our feet. So to summarize, I think building the capacity for analytics, it's not just about technology, but the culture side, bringing everyone to the table, making sure that the governance part of analytics is successful at your institution, and then just what for-profits really see analytics as building capacity in that front as a matter of urgency. It's survival in the game. So I'll stop there.
Let me comment on the urgency item. When we looked at these seven layers, or this typology of seven things, it was like the layers of an onion, and you peel away each one. Each one of those has the capacity to add several percentage points to your institution's retention. It's amazing how much difference the produced signals program has made and similar programs have made simply by paying attention and putting in place systematic and systemic ways of dealing and paying attention to retention and treating it with some urgency. These efforts, we'll look at these efforts 3 and 5 years from now and chuckle at how primitive they seem given the advances that are going to happen in predictive analytics and learning analytics over the next 3 to 5 years. But simply by paying attention and treating it as a matter of urgency, institutions can dramatically improve retention and student success. And this is only the beginning, because as we hone our skills and get into the personalized learning side and begin to deal with that, the potential is huge. And it's and when you see institutions that have dramatically improved these things in a year, or an outfit like Starfish that can go in and by having the know-how to know what things to focus on and how an institution simply by directing its energies can improve retention by 5 percentage points in a year, that suggests how serious this is. Linda?
So that's a bit of where our story is right now. We're in the midst of more analysis, more determination of how to move some of this information out, where can it make a difference, how to expand the case studies that we already have to more so that it can enrich and strengthen what we know. We talked about a matchup tool, and the questions are up there to just show you a few things that people might want to know so that when they go into this, they go in with a stronger ability than where they were if they were just going in blind. And so with that, I think we're going to open it up and see what questions you might have, how we might be able to expand what we're doing, if this is on point in terms of some of the things you're doing, and go from there. So there we are.
Hi. Just curious, I could see that this is all going to take senior leadership support inside the institution. To what extent can you describe the carrots and or sticks senior leadership is using to promote retention, for example, as a serious problem to address to their faculty?
Well, it's an outstanding question, and it's, kind of makes me squirm a little bit because of the fact that different leaders will go about it in different ways. And some will say, come, let us reason together. What's a good plan? Can we get it together? Not taking 5 years to get to a big plan, but can we put it together piece by piece? ASCU just hosted, for example, a webinar on transforming higher education, and they had several institutions represented that were doing key things. Now, some of them were relatively new campuses that had been established with the idea that they could be more innovative than those long-standing campuses. They are looking at things like full-year offerings so that you don't have a summer, that you're in a 12-month cycle, and it just is built in that that's what you do. And that retention ends up being a piece of how you review how faculty are doing. Now, it's a little bit of what you're seeing with No Child Left Behind with K-12 is that schools and ultimately faculty, teachers, are being assessed by how successful their students are. I could speak, and maybe John could do better with it in terms of when his president said, we're going to improve retention, what kind of steps did she take to ensure that that might happen? Not to put you on the spot or anything, John. But depending on which state you're talking about, sometimes the state boards themselves are more involved in this. Tennessee has been a leader. Missouri has had more of that history of data and the importance of data, and therefore the rewarding of event. They will show during faculty development days full assessment opportunities and more training so that people can understand better what's going on. I think you see some of that in more of the online education. You could also say that for the for-profits, and just take a look, what I would say is go home, if you're not a for-profit, go home and find one that you could partner with for a little bit or have a little conversation with them, because they don't have some of the barriers. They can say, Capella can say, we're going to do this in class assessment, and we're going to know where students are during each week, and when we see something that's not working, we're going to intervene and do something about it. So I didn't go honing right in on that. And John, I don't know if you want to say anything more about what incentives or carrots your president did, but I know that part of your ongoing work has been supported because you've got a leader that's interested in seeing improvement in retention.
Well, I think, can everyone hear me? That's even better. And it even works. So in terms of administrative incentives, I think one of the other keys is facilitating the staff on campuses to actually be able to innovate. Yeah. And in a number of the sessions that we talked about, one of the biggest hurdles for a number of people in terms of innovation is just getting access to the data. I see a lot of people shaking their heads. And so it's amazing about what you can do when you get into an environment where you have access to the data, where you can explore and enter into a dialogue. So in terms of building the capacity and looking at the culture of the institution, I think part of it is just having a culture that provides for this type of innovation.
So when a leader says innovation is important, so even though there are budget cuts happening all around you, innovation pools or innovation discussions and innovation support would still be there, for example. Another example has to do with the fact that people go across the campus in sharing what those great practices are, so that you have faculty forums and begin to develop more of a culture that these are good things that are going on and you too can improve student behavior. I think another thing that's going to be pushing this is maybe more of the stick than the carrot is the high issue of student debt. And student debt load, particularly when it begins to relate to students who don't complete on top of everything else. And so there's going to be more of an accounting for how are students doing and are they being retained when public money and federal money and all of the kinds of resources are going toward trying to support students. So anyway, each of you probably have a little story about that. Please.
Yes, I'm particularly interested in whether you found any patterns in the alignment of the kinds of data that the for-profits are collecting relative to the nonprofits to try to shed light more directly on things like retention or the impacts of particular sacred cows, if you will. And I'll give you an example. We often hear, particularly research institutions and the presidents and VCs thereof, extol how important their research institution is at attracting and retaining students. And yet, when pressed, it's often difficult for them to articulate that into anything that's very direct and, in fact, actionable. That shows how the research money and measured in dollars for research grants acquired has particularly relevant impact to second-year chemistry undergraduate courses.
Well, we were fortunate to have the participation of a good number of the for-profits, and they're not all alike by any stretch of the imagination, except in their dedication to using analytics strategically from a business point of view and from a learning point of view. They all use analytics from day one or before to find out when students are demonstrating at-risk behavior, and can act within hours and days of a student starting their online journey to find out when they're in trouble based on their behaviors in comparison with behaviors in the past. So you can say consistently they all do that, but they all have very different approaches. Capella is focusing on their competency model, and they have analytics embedded in that in very impressive ways. The University of Phoenix is undergoing a major redesign activity now to move into a world where they're able to look at personalization and the outcomes of personalized learning on outcomes, on student success, and to embed that in their processes. This notion of embedding predictive analytics in academic and administrative processes is something that is very much part of their DNA.
And we do have a representative here in case you might want to say something, but if you can think about that. I don't want to put people on the spot. But the issue also has to do with not just gathering the data, but having the people behind the data understanding what do we do with it once we see these things. And so it's part of the talent base. I'm hoping that might be what you would reinforce here, but that once you have the data, you are disseminating and discussing it, and you have intervention points. One of my big fears was, okay, well, we'll go and invest in a lot of data analytics, but then we won't put the resources behind what are the intervention tools that you should map to, and how will you make sure there are multiple ways students can reach the intervention so that they can improve what they're doing. Yeah. And many people say, keep it simple. I mean, improve your gateway courses so more people get through. Improve the fact that people are able to get help, be assessed for the help they need, and make sure that they do something about it. I mean, Virginia Polytechnic Institute's Math Emporium, a long-standing opportunity that showed it could make a big difference for students. But would you like to say something? University of Phoenix here, Mike is here, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
It's a spot he likes to be on.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we're doing. I'm actually presenting Wednesday morning in the predictive analytics track. I'm going to share a model that we have working with. And yeah, it's definitely, I like what you said about, we're looking at student success. The comment you made about, for for-profits, lost seat equals lost revenue, I'm not a fan of that. I mean, whether you think that's true or not, I think that really is saying, oh, geez, we just care about getting them through one more class and getting X more dollars out of them. And that's not the case. I mean, we're really focusing on student success and student learning just as much as the next institution. So, if you talk about what are those outcomes we're trying to work on, it really is about student success and student learning. So I think it's, again, everyone's trying to solve the same problems.
I would like to comment on just kind of give a specific example of the type of data that for-profits are interested in and nonprofits are not as interested in. We consistently hear from the for-profits, we want to see data and analytics around faculty engagement, faculty participation, faculty response times. And that is tied to student success. I'll just make the comment about nonprofits. It's not so much that they're not asking about data about faculty. It's off the table. We can't even talk about it. And to me, that's disturbing because when you just sort of think about faculty's motivation to teach, are they participating, are they responsive? These are, at least prima facie, contributing factors to student success. So we see far more openness from the for-profit sector on looking at faculty data, how they're engaged. So we talk a lot about student engagement, student participation, but what about the faculty data?
Thank you. And I think that's an important piece because if you've done any of the research on the NSSE, the National Survey for Student Engagement, or SESI, the Community College Survey, you find that the research shows those that had a sense of urgency and those that had sort of an unrelenting culture or belief that they could do better. They could be some of the leading ones and doing the best they can be doing, but they had a sense that we can always learn more about our students and we can always do better.
This on? I just wanted to add to that. I mean, I work at a nonprofit institution, and with the decline of federal dollars and state dollars, there's no question that we're also looking at every seat as being, absolutely important to our college. Every student we lose is money, is revenue we lose. So I don't think that was a particular stab at for-profits at all. I was actually curious. All of this that I heard about, I didn't hear anything about Achieving the Dream, which is a data-driven movement in community colleges, and I was just curious if you had any commentary. Is there a reason we haven't heard anything about that as part of this?
Good question. It isn't that they're not there by intention, and some of the schools that have been surveyed are actually Achieving the Dream colleges. So a good point to say when you get an opportunity like Lumina supporting and then Gates also supporting Achieving the Dream colleges, it was to say, let's be very intentional about the data and the definition of the data, the quality of the data, and the use of the data, and then let's move forward. And so one of the things that happened there was certainly the Community College Research Center being front and center as the IR function, sort of an outsourced IR function for these schools. But they did learn, they were trained, and they were continued to have professional development in what it was to have the right kind of data and using the data to improve. So that's a good point. Thank you. Any Achieving the Dream colleges out there by chance? Well, would you like to make some comments? Okay, yeah. But it does give a template, and sometimes even when you haven't been funded, and we saw some of the schools that didn't get Achieving the Dream status, like in Ohio, and they decided they were going to use the template anyway because it was a really good template, or some of them that were in the Completion by Design out of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that might not have made the cut, but decided, boy, you know, that's a pathway pattern that really can work, and we're going to put some resource behind it. But what it really happened was it was infusing into the data capacity, the IR capacity, because what we found for community colleges, for example, is sometimes their average IR people, they might have 1.5 institutional research people. Well, that's an average. And so the issue is saying you can't do data without data people or people that understand the data. You have 7.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And this is what I'm talking about in terms of collaborations. We have to find ways to get to constellations of institutions or groups working together to be able to get beyond that trap of having 1.25 FTE people to do the job of 5. And there are mechanisms for that. I'm very confident that we're going to find ways to span that, but it's not going to be done by each institution standing on its own bottom, I don't think.
Well, and I almost wonder in the evolution of this, if we call it evolution, you know, IT was not IT forever. There was a place when suddenly technology became what it is and what it continues to evolve to be. And we might learn a little bit of what happened when suddenly that became interesting, important, critical, urgent, and how it's grown to be what it is. And I think we're going to have a comparable sort of pathway of what's going to happen with institutional research, IT combination, the partnering across an institution. And that may be something to look at some of the historical data on how IT formed and became what it was.
Just wondering, listening to the conversation, if there's a danger of it being oversold, especially to senior managers, because, and I think there's real benefits, and some of the things I've seen in the workshop yesterday and today are quite amazing, and I think that will be very important to move forward on. But I was just making a little bit of a list, and I was at the first international conference on learning management systems in 1989, and I'm sure we're going to have the first perfect LMS come out next year. I think web learning was 1994, e-learning was 2000, I think ERP was about 2005. So just wonder if you have any comments about overselling or maybe as part of a bigger continuing improvement.
I'll say one thing very quickly is that most institutions, if they make an intelligent investment in student success, in analytics supporting student success, it will pay for itself. The ROI on student success, you almost can't argue about it. And Linda's run the numbers at institutions, and Al's done the same. And now, I'm not saying that you can't fail to get an ROI. There are bad investments to make, but literally, there are so many examples out there now that institutions that are making the investment and it's paying for itself immediately, and then continuing to do so if you can hold those retentions. So this is something that and this is why you start intelligently, go after the low-hanging fruit, pick something you know is going to be demonstrable and have an ROI, and then move from there. And so that you take prisoners along the way, as we say in the consulting business, by demonstrating the capacity to do it. And that's the way to avoid the overpromising.
Yeah, I have a quick comment on that one. That's really a great point. We, as vendors, we tend to oversell analytics, and then when you say clients, when they come in, they think, okay, we just bought analytics solution, so this is going to solve everything. And then we're in this huge cycle of disappointment and recrimination. So one of the things that we're now realizing is each institution is in a different place and it has a different set of needs with analytics. So part of the onboarding process, from a vendor point of view is let's find out what the sweet spot is. What are some small things that you can get started with? Put together a 3-month plan, 6-month plan, a year plan. But you're absolutely right. If an institution comes in and thinks that, okay, we have analytics, we have everything in place, and we're going to get instant effect, it doesn't happen that way. So just selecting, and every institution, it's different, different entry points.
One question is, what do you know, if anything, from this survey about how students feel about these? So this is institutions tooling up big time, notionally in the students' interests to get them through. But do you have any sense of how it feels at the end, at the student end?
Sorry, can I just say that was a question I was going to ask about the stakeholders, because I'm quite concerned, I would like to know more about the students as the key stakeholders, because I think it's great the work you're doing with institutions and vendors, but it seems to be a big gap about the students, and this is what this is about. So I'd just like to kind of...
I'm asking that because I saw your tweet, Sheila.
Well, again, I will point to John Campbell just because I know his work, but you have students that are integrated into what the Signal Project is about, to the point where they pretty well identify themselves. I'm a yellow, or I'm a, but it is important, and it is a piece we need to figure out how to get a handle on. But you've used students in focus groups from the beginning. Is that correct?
So generally in our work, the students aren't, I guess at first I would kind of twist it around. If analytics is about also informing the students, which is part of our project, is to give the students the same data that the faculty are getting in terms of where they are, whether they're at risk or not. The students have responded extremely positively to that. But they're part of the project. They're not, it's not a separate analytics solution that produces a list and something may happen after it. They get to see the results. So I think that's part of what we need to do as a community, is try to provide at least some of that transparency of how the data is being used, so that they can benefit as well as the institutions and the faculty can benefit.
When you look at the typology of all the different analytics things, and the first couple of this, the pipeline, the strategic enrollment management, recruiting a student class that's going to succeed, and for those students at risk, providing mechanisms for them to succeed. Institutions that do that, and the students know it, they like that. The second level is eliminating bottleneck courses, improving the first-year experience, making sure students can get the courses they need to graduate on time. Those are all things that students can be actively involved in, and in many of the processes they are. You go right down the list, and this is all about improving the capacity of the students to succeed and achieve their learning objectives on time, and to the extent that they can be involved in that process, more is the better.
I'm going to draw time at that point. I mean, there's such interest in this, and from my perspective, this panel has encapsulated, exactly part of what makes LAK LAK. Okay, we've got lots of guys who do good tech here. We've got educators interested in what's coming. This is saying the system is big and complex. There's some really interesting organizational change issues for LAK to wrestle with as well. And I want to thank you for pulling this panel together. Can we just thank them? This is great.